There's a light in the sky, rising in the air. There's a feeling so strong. It's time to light the fire, like a bright shining light. Getting more out of life. Love, sharing time with friends. Feeling so strong.
Hello, welcome to the House of Wellness. I'm Luke Darcy and happy to be here alongside my great friend Joe Stanley. Hello, Joe.
You know I love being here, Darcy. It is my home away from home.
Well, we know you're here under your own free will,
Yes,
Joe. I think
yes.
you are anyway.
I am,
You're not a
most
hostage. Which brings me to a story that made headlines around the world, and it asked the question, when is an animal not a person, Joe? Now, the answer is when it's an elephant. Did you see this story? It sounds a bit bizarre, but the topic has been hotly debated in the US after an animal activist campaigned for a long-term resident of the New York Bronx Zoo to be released.
Well, the elephant's name is Happy and she's lived at the Bronx Zoo since 1977. But in a case that's tested whether human rights should be applied to animals, an activist group called the Non-Human Rights Project argued she is being illegally confined and should be released.
The group lost the case, Joe. New York's top court of appeals ruled that while elephants like Happy deserve proper care and compassion, laws that protect the liberty of human beings do not apply to non-human animals.
It's a very interesting case, Das, because if the case had gone the other way, it would have raised all sorts of issues around pet ownership or farm and service animals also being illegally confined.
Fascinating story indeed, Joe. Animal lover Jackie Felgate is also with us. Welcome to you, Jack.
Hello, Daz and Joe.
Good to see you. Do you think animals should have the same rights as humans?
I definitely don't. No, I think modern zoos, though, have come ahead in leaps and bounds in terms of animal welfare. And these days they do so much amazing work conserving the species, but perhaps we don't need to go as far as giving them human rights.
Well, the Bronx Zoo says Happy is beautifully cared for and lives up to her name in captivity. I guess one big difference between animals and humans is animals can't voice their opinions, which honestly, knowing my dog, is a good thing, I would say.
Yeah. The Non-Human Rights Project has vowed to continue with the fight with cases involving other animals, so watch this space. Tell us what else is making news, Jack.
Yeah, plenty happening, Daz. The big news in health is a little closer to home, though. Researchers here in Victoria have partnered with international scientists to develop a game-changing blood test that can identify colon cancer patients who are at risk of relapse. 1 in 5 stage 2 colon cancer patients will relapse, but until now, there's been no way of pinpointing those at risk. So all patients are offered chemotherapy post-surgery, despite the majority not actually needing it.
This is amazing, Jack, because I know that the side effects of chemo can be absolutely horrendous. So if it can be avoided by those people who it's not necessary for, that's just a wonderful result.
Yeah, exactly. And while on the flip side, some older colon cancer patients may choose to forgo just in case chemotherapy. But if they test positive via the blood test, they can start the necessary treatment sooner. And the test is expected to be available in Australia by October. And the medical breakthroughs keep coming, this time in the UK. Scientists in Cambridge have designed a potential drug they hope will lead to the first ever treatment of Parkinson's disease. There is currently no cure or a way to stop the progression of Parkinson's. However, neuroscientists have already identified changes in a person's brain cells that are a key cause of the disease. It's hoped the new drug will act as a kind of chemical sticking plaster on the affected brain cells to stop that process from happening.
Honestly, you think about the incredible breakthroughs that we're seeing in diseases such as Parkinson. It's such a debilitating disease, so what a wonderful thing to happen.
It really is. And the important thing to note is this isn't being hailed as a cure, but as something that can halt the progression of the disease. And that's all for this week, Daz.
I love it, Jack. Great stories all around. Thank you for that. We'll see you a little bit later on with an update on the common deficiency that affects 2 billion people. But up next, we go wild for mushrooms. They're popping up everywhere at the moment, Joe.
Which has also caused a spike in poisonings. We find out why foraging should be left to the experts next on the House of Wellness.
Joe, there's an amazing doco on Netflix called Fantastic Fungi that delves into the magical world of mushrooms, from varieties that clear up oil spills to the underground networks that help trees talk to each other.
You know, I have watched this and it's an amazing doco. I remember the time-lapse photography, which is truly extraordinary, and being amazed by the story of Paul Stamets, the world mushroom expert.
There is something special about mushrooms, that's for sure, especially a variety that popped up in South Australia. Thousands of people are flocking to see the ghost mushrooms found in a forest just outside of Mount Gambier. And what's special about these is that they're bioluminescent. They glow in the dark.
It's so magical. They're calling it the neon forest, and apparently the rainfall has brought them out and they're just flourishing.
So during the day, Joe, they look like your average white mushroom, but at night they simply light up. It's caused when the enzymes in the mushrooms hit the air, and it's an incredible sight.
It's like they go disco dancing at night time, but I think mushrooms are intriguing and there's so much we're learning about them all the time. Jason Crosby is an exotic mushroom farmer who's well and truly immersed in the fabulous world of fungi.
Whenever someone says to me, oh, I hate mushrooms or I don't like mushrooms, I always think, no, you don't like button mushrooms. Like, you probably haven't tried all the other varieties that are available out there. I'm Jason Crosby and I'm the mushroom man.
Jason Crosby is a fungus enthusiast who turned his fascination for fungi into a thriving business. In 2016, Jason left his job in IT to pursue his passion and started farming exotic mushrooms from his specially built grow shed just outside of Ballarat in Victoria.
I always had in the back of my mind that it's something that I'd love to do as a job. I wasn't happy in my career at the time, so I thought I was just going to do a bit of a Hail Mary and try it and see how it goes, and yeah, it just went from there.
Now, every week, Jason harvests around 80 kilograms of exotic mushrooms, supplying restaurants and food stores around the state. His temperature-controlled grow rooms mean he can cultivate year-round.
Basically, it all starts with this little plate here, which is the actual mushroom culture grown out on a nutrient dish. So you can see the mycelium on top of the plate there. So basically what we do is take a little wedge from that agar plate and we put it into a jar of grain spawn, which is just oats, hydrated oats. And then the mushroom will colonise the oats like it's doing there. And then once that's fully colonised, we then break that up and pour some into the sterilised substrate. And then those bags will come into incubation and they'll slowly consume the substrate, which you can see happening there.
There are around 14,000 species of mushrooms worldwide, and around 3,000 of these are edible.
We're kind of limited in Australia to what we're allowed to grow because of biosecurity laws and stuff like that. I think we grow about 8 to 10 different varieties here.
From blue oysters, yellow oysters, lion's mane and king browns, each variety has its own unique flavour and texture.
These are king brown mushrooms, so great for making steaks or scallops. They have a really meaty texture and really juicy and tender. So these are yellow oyster mushrooms, so they're beautiful yellow colour, great all-rounder, good for pastas, risottos, that sort of thing. Here we have the lion's mane mushroom. So this is good for also pressing into steaks. You can make vegan crab cakes out of them. They have like a seafoody sort of texture, and they have medicinal properties as well. Really good for your brain.
Really?
And they're delicious, so that's a bonus. If you cut a cross-section, it actually look like a cross-section of a brain, which is bizarre.
When Jason started 6 years ago, there were just a handful of exotic mushroom farms. Now there's over 80 operating nationwide. During lockdown, many mushroom enthusiasts started growing their own or foraging for wild mushrooms. But not all mushrooms are edible, and some can be deadly.
This is an Amanita muscaria mushroom, also known as fly agaric. It looks like a fairy tale mushroom, basically. And it is actually poisonous, so I tend to stay away from this one. Like, there are mushrooms like the pine mushroom or slippery jack or something like that that are pretty easy to distinguish, but besides that, I probably wouldn't trust my ID skills.
Jason's message is clear. Picking wild mushrooms, even for an expert, can be dangerous and, in some cases, fatal.
People just really need to be careful about what they're picking, know what they're looking for, buy a field guide, have someone experienced with you who knows what they're looking for, and even then, just still be really careful.
The good news is that responsibly sourced mushrooms are packed full of nutrition and carry a swag of health benefits that are only just being discovered.
I think mushrooms have the potential to fix a lot of the problems that we face in the world. I'm just fascinated by them, like the biology, the ecology of mushrooms, like the diversity of species, the uses. Like I think we're learning more and more now about medicinal benefits of mushrooms. Yeah, it is a very fascinating world, and I know I love it, and I think other people will be fascinated by it as well.
I can understand the fascinations with mushrooms, Jo, and they also taste great as well.
Oh, absolutely. But I always think about that classic toadstool, you know, the one with the red cap and the white spots that you see in, you know, fairy tales and Alice in Wonderland. They look harmless enough, but don't be fooled by how beautiful they look or even how much they look like the ones you've seen in the supermarket. More often than not, they could be lethal.
The whole mushroom foraging may sound like a romantic winter's day trip, but this time each year there's a spike in hospitalisations and even deaths from people eating poisonous varieties.
Even experts like Jason can have difficulty identifying the good from the bad. So the advice is buy your mushies from a reputable supplier and leave the wild ones in the ground.
When the rains come in autumn, that's when we start to get mushrooms sprouting. They sprout in the open, in people's front lawns. They also sprout around large trees, big trees in parks. So they're pretty prevalent everywhere in those early autumn through to midwinter months. And every year we get calls to the poison centre for people that have been ingesting mushrooms and feeling unwell afterwards. The Victorian Poison Information Centre would typically receive somewhere between 200 to 400 calls a year. Overall, probably about a quarter of patients would require a trip to the emergency department. So the most dangerous mushrooms are probably the yellow stainer and the death cap or the Amanita phalloides mushroom. About 80% of our calls are from people that develop gastric symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhoea, abdominal cramps, and the most likely culprit's going to be the yellow stainer. The one that we really get concerned about, and I guess the one that keeps me up at night, is the death cap, which across the world accounts for about 90% of fatalities. The poison within it takes time to elaborate, takes time to form. So people could eat the mushroom and not feel unwell for 24, 36 hours and present late, and by the time they present with their symptoms, their liver is starting to be affected already. And for those people that die from a death cap mushroom ingestion, it's from liver failure. Looking at a mushroom, it's very hard to distinguish whether it's poisonous or not. It takes an expert to determine whether this is a poisonous mushroom or not sometimes, and even so, the experts can get it wrong because it's so difficult. Look at a photo of a death cap mushroom. It's really well formed. It's a sort of whitish mushroom. It's got these gills and a veil underneath the head of the mushroom, and it has a sort of receptacle that it grows out of that's usually below the soil. So when you pull the mushroom out of the soil, you lose the receptacle that stays behind. So that sort of distinguishing feature is no longer there. And the veil is very, very thin. So again, once you disturb it, it tends to break down. So what you've got in your hand is probably the same look as most mushrooms that you would buy in the supermarket. We do have some treatments, but effectively the best way to stop having symptoms or significant illness from a death cap mushroom is to not eat them.
Now, Jo, I didn't realise that pets can also be attracted to and poisoned by wild mushrooms, so some good advice to take care when walking your animals as well.
And worth checking the garden if you have a dog. Common backyard plants that are also poisonous to poochers are the spiky sago palm, azaleas, I didn't know that, I have heaps of azaleas, and rhododendrons, along with any fertilisers and snail or rodent bait, of course.
Plus, some other toxic things you want to keep the dogs away from are chocolate, sultanas, grapes, onion and garlic, and fatty meat scraps as well. So easier said than done when it comes to Dennis the Staffy, who eats everything.
Yeah, I would say Daisy too. Well, she cost us a fortune within the first 4 months of having her because she ate some fruit loaf, which of course has sultanas in it, which of course are grapes. So you just got to be careful. And if you can afford it, get pet insurance is my advice. Up next, Gerald quickly serves up the natural brain booster that can help fight dementia.
And Jackie has the lowdown on the deficiency that's so common. Doctors say it's hiding in plain sight. That's right after this.
Alzheimer's disease affects up to 70% of people with dementia and is the most common form of dementia. Whilst the underlying cause is unknown, the biggest risk factor is the inevitable ageing process. Alzheimer's disease damages the brain due to a plaque buildup of the toxic protein amyloid. This affects brain function, resulting in impaired memory, thinking, and behaviour. In early stages, the symptoms can be subtle. The first sign is often unusual memory loss, such as forgetting how to do regular tasks completed frequently, or forgetting well-known people and places. You should always consult your doctor if you're concerned about symptoms. Like many areas of our health, regular physical activity, following a Mediterranean-like diet, and being mentally active may assist in the slowdown and progression of Alzheimer's disease. A recent study following patients with an early stage of Alzheimer's disease called mild cognitive impairment revealed that the medical nutrition drink Suvanade slowed the progression of memory and cognitive decline by 60% and also reduced the loss of everyday task performance by 45% when taken daily over 3 years. The findings of this study were possible thanks to 20 years of research. Early diagnosis is key to ensuring that Alzheimer's is more of an unwelcome companion rather than the driver of your life.
GQ there with some great advice on how to combat dementia the natural way. Now, Joe, we often talk food preferences here on the House of Wellness, and we've covered all kinds of health-related diets, but the one that's sticking around, it seems more than anything, is the plant-based diet. More Aussies seem to be giving meat the boot. Now, yeah, come on, Joe.
I know where this is going.
You had a patch where you were vegan.
I never said I was vegan.
I was
Jack, this is
How long
an
did this go on
ongoing
for?
thing. No.
I was really proud of her for 3 or 4 days, Joe. Showed great...
attempted the plant-based diet for about 2 weeks, but in the end I did go back to steak. That's absolutely true.
What about you, Jackie?
I put a beautiful piece of pork shoulder in the slow cooker this morning, actually. So that's my answer.
Where you sit.
Yes. Look, I get that people might go veggie for ethical reasons, which definitely was one of the things that was motivating me. And there's no doubt we all need to fill our plates with healthy greens and vegetables, but the information and various studies about the benefits of giving up meat altogether do vary wildly.
Yeah, meat has certainly been given a bad rap lately, but what everyone agrees on is that meat is a great source of iron. So if you don't eat it, you do need to get iron from other sources, I think, is where people are going.
Exactly, and stats show that about 2 billion people have an iron deficiency, which is incredibly high. Being constantly tired is a common sign that you may be iron deficient, and women especially tend to ignore the fatigue and put it down to simply being busy and running around like we all do.
Well, absolutely. It's something that I have been... I remember there was an ad campaign years ago. I was sort of alert to it, but I've never looked into it myself. And I think many women only discover that they're low in iron when they get tested while pregnant or for an unrelated health complaint.
And in finding out more about iron deficiency for this story, I found out that 1/3 of women who are low in iron put up with the symptoms for more than 6 months, and 27% ignored it for 5 to 10 years.
Well, tell me, have you ever been low in iron?
I am, actually. I'm anemic, and all of those symptoms are so true for me. I was so tired. I was really dark in the eyes, and you think, I'm running after my kids. I'm busy with my job. This is just part of it. But I actually went and got tested and found that I was so low, I actually needed to have iron infusion in hospital, which is a really quick way. It was fantastic. It was life-changing for me, and it's a great way to bring iron back into your system.
Just shows me that women are much more resilient. Guys wouldn't put up with that for how long? 6 months?
Yeah,
we tapped them out a lot earlier than that.
Yes. Well, it's important to get treated if you are low in iron. We turn to an expert to find out more about the deficiency that's so common. Doctors describe it as hiding in plain sight.
We know from some data that 5% of men and about 30%, 33%, so 1/3 of women, in the reproductive years, so that's from when the periods start till menopause, have iron deficiency. The reason why there are more women who have iron deficiency is because mainly of heavy periods, and they may have had heavy periods all their life, so they think that's normal. But when you compare them to someone else, they're actually incredibly heavy, and they're going to be making that woman regularly losing iron with the period. Also pregnancy. The mother needs to have adequate iron for the baby to have adequate iron, and so the requirements metabolically are much greater. So the symptoms of iron deficiency are quite diverse, and they're very common across many conditions, but probably classically fatigue, tiredness. There can be changes in, for example, exercise capacity. So women may find that they're not able to do the same exercise or to do the same amount of work they used to be without getting tired. Some women may develop shortness of breath. They may get heart palpitations. And we think that most women don't realise that their symptoms could be iron deficiency. Most women have busy lives, and they often have multiple roles in their lives, and so automatically they will think, oh, well, it's probably life stress, or my sleep's been a bit more disturbed, but perhaps I'm worrying about things. I think one of the things that we need to realise is that iron deficiency in women costs women money. In working women, they will lose income because of loss of work time, having to take time off work because of the symptoms of iron deficiency, or because they've got heavy periods, or whatever reason is causing the iron deficiency. But not only is that loss of work time, loss of productivity, reduction in productivity, but it also has an economic impact on the whole of the Australian economy. And it's thought that the Australian economy loses about $380 to $400 million a year in women having iron deficiency. It's not just an issue for the individual woman, it's actually a problem for the community at large.
It's never a good idea to ignore health problems, so if you have any symptoms like Elizabeth Farrell just mentioned, book yourself in for a blood test. That goes double for women.
That is really good advice, Joe. I know that in the past I've been pretty good at ignoring symptoms, like when I was playing footy before I was diagnosed as a celiac.
Yeah.
It's tended to just let obvious symptoms go and you just push on. You just think, oh, well, that's normal, until someone from outside go, yeah, something's up there, you need to get that checked out.
That's the good thing about the House of Wellness. We can send you off for any test at any time.
Have my eyes checked, have my heart checked. Oh, yeah, I've never felt better.
Yeah, I also think, though, it's really important to be a detective for your own health and also an advocate. I think a lot of women, perhaps especially going through menopause, can often be dismissed as being emotional or run down. So the vigilance to examine what's really going on has to go both ways, from the person who presents with the problem and the action of the medical expert.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Joe. And the attitude from the medical professionals sometimes you're seeing is so important. A recent study found that a lot of women feel dismissed when they present a problem. That's actually called medical gaslighting. And there's a great article on the House of Wellness website if you're interested in finding out more.
Coming up next, whether you're feeling blue or tickled pink, we look at how colour can impact your life right here on the House of Wellness.
Despite our frequent banter, GQ, I do actually care about your well-being. So tell me, how are your stress levels?
Pretty good, actually, in spite of working with you today.
Well, you're one of the lucky few, because up to 35% of people say they experience moderate to high levels of stress.
For those frazzled individuals, Heinzie, let me introduce you to the king of Ayurvedic herbs, ashwagandha, or Withania somnifera. This small shrub with yellow flowers has been used for almost 6,000 years as an adaptogen. That means it helps our body adapt to stress.
Extracts from the plant's roots and leaves help support our memory, mental recall and focus, which are really important for those that are under pressure because they're the first things to go.
Our physical self can also feel the effects of stress, and that's when we can turn to another plant, Siberian ginseng, which supports physical stamina.
And from the nutrient world, foods rich in vitamin B5, things like nuts, seeds, avocados and red meat, help support energy production and help us cope with environmental stress.
Stress is an inevitable part of life, but helpers out there, you just need to know where to get it. Ashwagandha, Siberian ginseng and vitamin B5 are available in a high-strength, convenient one-a-day supplement.
Well, if ashwagandha is the king of the Ayurvedic world, then I am the queen of this segment.
Spare me, please.
Off with his head! The A to Z of Vitamins is brought to you by Go Healthy's Go Ashwagandha 8000 Stress and Energy One A Day, a convenient, high-strength one-a-day formulation to support energy levels and coping with environmental stress.
Thanks, Heinzie and GQ, once again celebrating the incredible benefits found in nature. A natural wonder that recently went viral was of a hummingbird changing colour. I don't know if you saw this, Darcy, but it absolutely brightened my day. And the chameleon-like display of this beautiful bird had social media users mesmerised.
It is incredible to watch, Joe, as its feathers change from bright pink to black and shades of green with literally every turn of its head.
I just had no idea that hummingbirds can do that.
Likewise.
Yeah, so the video lifted everyone's spirits because colour has the power to transform our mood, whether it's popping on a bright outfit or a favourite shade of lipstick. And as it turns out, there's real science behind the saying, colour me happy. Can you tell us, why do people have personal preferences when it comes to colour?
Part of it is based upon the different experiences that they may have had through their own life. They may have been complimented upon a particular colour, starts to then reinforce a particular liking or preference for a certain colour. But there's also some really interesting things that transcend your own individual personal preferences, things that are baked into who we are as individuals based upon evolutionary and biological processes that instead start to inform our type of response at a more psychological level as well.
When you say baked in, do you mean culturally the significance of a colour?
Partly that. So there are some certain cultural signifiers that are attached to colour, but there's also some deeper biological things there as well. So in terms of the cultural factors, we might look at a certain colour, let's go orange, and depending upon where we are around the world, that's going to have different types of meanings. If I am in Northern Ireland, orange starts to represent Protestantism, and so it can start to give rise to that broader sectarian potential conflict between Protestants and Catholics that were really associated with Northern Ireland. If we're in the Netherlands, it's a national colour. So if you look at orange, it's a colour of national pride and identity. In Hinduism, orange is a really sacred colour. In Buddhism, orange is the colour of the robes of monks and is a way of demonstration of their renouncing of the material world around them. So all of those things are different cultural expressions, cultural manifestations of the colour orange. Depending upon where you are, will then start to determine the meaning attached to orange.
For me, orange it kind of represents healthy, outdoor living, beautiful orange juice and fruit. It makes me feel like it's a really kind of healthy colour.
Absolutely. And possibly that's because of the association between orange and sun. We start to have an association between orange and the actual orange itself of a fruit. And so all of those things can also give rise to certain meanings around a colour like orange.
But it can be true that you have an emotional reaction to a colour because of a memory or an association.
Absolutely. So certain types of responses that a person could have might be based upon those past experiences with a certain colour. I'm thinking of certain shades of yellow. If you're sitting in a bathtub and you've had those wonderful experiences with your mum or dad as a kid with the little duckies that come through, those colours of yellow might actually give rise to a sense of peace and of wellness and of fulfilment. And that would be a very individual response based upon those past experiences.
Or school uniforms.
Or school uniforms.
Colours that we were forced to wear in primary school, we may not wish to wear in our adult life.
Most definitely. Certainly in high school, I had a certain maroon colour for my school uniform. I don't love it. I would be certainly trying to back away from that colour wherever I could. It probably doesn't match all that well with my skin colour and my hair colouring either, but the associations that you have will often be fairly formative and might mean that you, as a result, are less likely to want to wear that type of colour into the future.
What about the gendered colours, pink and blue? and how we sort of seem to have been raised to wear one or the other, does that impact on our choices?
Pink is a really interesting colour. If we were to go back to the pre-World War II period, there wasn't such a strong association between the colour pink and femininity. It was only in the post-World War II period when we had Mamie Eisenhower, the wife of Dwight Eisenhower, the former US president, in the early 50s. She was really known for wearing pink dresses. For her, that was something, a colour that really resonated for her, drew out her features. She was also someone that was really looked up to, though, as a style icon, someone that was one of the best 10 dressed women each year, every single year for the Eisenhower presidency. And so as a result of that, it started to be this confluence of this is a certain type of femininity, this is a certain colour that she was popularising, those two things coming together, being picked up by broader cultural trends and movies and other types of things, as a result of which, in the second half of the 20th century, pink now equals femininity.
So now that seems to have been taken into advertising.
Yeah.
What are the significance of the colours that people use in advertising?
Advertising is all about trying to have particular associations with a brand. And colour is often a really important component of those brand identifiers. A great example would be Tiffany blue, that really eggshell blue colour that is associated with Tiffany's. If I was to present that colour to someone, people would go, that represents sophistication. Now, the reason why that association has come about is because of a huge amount of advertising over 100, 150 odd years, really trying to build up that association between a certain shade of blue and then a certain type of outcome. And that's broadly speaking what advertisers are trying to do. They'll have certain colours associated with their brand and they try to imbue it with meaning so that we as consumers can look at those and start feeling particular emotions that the companies are wanting us to feel.
Why do colours make us feel emotions?
There's a number of reasons why. I think that the strongest research is around the colour red. Red in nature is a warning signal. When we see red toadstools, when we see red-backed spiders, it's typically a signifier of poison. And so we start to have that representation that red equals warning, red equals danger. Red, though, is really complicated because there's some other things that it can also start to do. If I'm wearing red, as a type of clothing, I'm going to feel more powerful, more dominant as a result of wearing the colour red. There's been some great research looking at the Olympic Games and for certain combative sports, and research has found that those that have worn the colour red are much more likely to win their fights. Red has a huge number of potential meanings, many of which have a biological basis to it, and it just comes down to the context as to which of those meanings give rise to that certain type of response. Colour is really important for identity formation. If we talk about and look at the meanings that are ascribed to colour and start to then see how that maps onto certain types of social groups or political groups, we see that for footy colours, they're wearing those colours with pride as a way to say, this is my family, this is the group of people that I actually aspire to belong to or that I feel really comfortable with. So in that way, colour is almost like the type of plumage that are worn by birds. It's a way of demonstrating, this is my group, this is my tribe. Other people out there with those other different colours, they're not part of us. And so it can be very important for identity formation and signalling that to other people as well.
Changing the colour of your hair should not come at the expense of its health. For the best at-home hair colouring experience, Vitality have introduced the new V colour range. It's vegan and it's made with organic extracts. Hair itself is safe thanks to the reconstructive properties in the formula. The V range has diamond skin protection, which means it reduces the risk of allergic reactions. Finally, the range is resourceful and ammonia-free. And in hair care world, we want to avoid these chemicals because they can cause damage. Make sure you use the V colour with a specially formulated colour developer on a 1:1 ratio. The application is easy and takes 30 to 45 minutes, and you can choose from 12 light and fragrant shades. Hair colour is like art. It reflects your personality, your style, your emotions. The only difficult part is really picking the colour. For me, it's easy because blondes always have the most fun.
Thanks, Jade Kay there, staying with the theme of colour and how it can brighten your day and influence your mood.
A bit like that beautiful orange jumper you're wearing today, Jo.
Just like that.
It's a mood brightener in itself. Earlier, we were discussing dangerous foods for our dogs, but making sure your dog gets enough exercise is a big one too, Jo. Now, Beck and I love walking Dennis together, but you can get a little bit irate when he's pulling on the lead or a bit frustrated if he doesn't come back at times.
Look, it is a hard thing. Daisy, our Labrador, is exactly the same. I must say, we had to send her away to teach her how to walk on a lead, and then they taught us how to do it as well. So, you know, we were those people dragged along by the dog at the end of the lead. That was us.
And people often say, you know, who's walking who, Jo?
Oh, yeah, it's hilarious
Yeah,
when
I'm
people
sure you
say
would have
that.
taken that well. We know you can see that at times. But a new university study has just investigated the impact dog walking has on our gait and our feet. The results suggest even the best behaved pups can leave us a little off balance.
Podiatrist Dr. Helen Banwell has treated just about every type of foot injury you can think of. But in recent years, one common cause of walking accidents has piqued her curiosity.
So as part of my work, I was working with children with disability, and what we were finding is that they were being prescribed assistant dogs far more often than what they had been in the past, and that's a fabulous thing. But we had noted that some children were presenting with injuries to their face or their body, and parents were reporting that they had fallen or tripped while walking their dog. So when we looked at the limited research that had been done in this area, we found a study in America that found that for all of the human and animal interactions that had resulted in somebody being hospitalised, nearly a quarter of the time it was because somebody fell over while walking their dog. So that raised the question for us that if we are going to see a lot more dogs being used as assistant dogs, we really needed to understand what happens to us as we walk our dog on a lead.
Using 19 adult walkers and 15 lucky pups, Helen and her colleagues at the University of South Australia measured how we walk alone compared to how we walk with a dog.
That measurement was conducted with a PEDAR insole system. So this is a wireless system that goes inside your shoes and measures the pressure as you are walking along, and that relays back to a computer, and we can capture the changes in the pressure sensation going through your feet as you walk. You know, they always say don't work with children or animals, but I have to say the animals were incredibly well behaved on this one, and it hasn't altered my thought process that I'd much rather work with a dog than a human most days, I've got to be honest.
As Helen had predicted, the study found that our bodies tend to lean back when being pulled along by a dog, but there was one finding that surprised her.
What we hadn't thought of was that we move our pressure back, or we lean back when we're walking a dog, regardless of that dog's behaviour. So what we were specifically looking for was, does our gait change when we have a dog that pulls on lead versus a dog that walks alongside us at a standard heel position? It turned out it didn't matter where the dog walked. We instinctively leant back in a brace position in readiness for that dog to potentially pull us further forward. What that means for us is that we've intentionally altered our centre of gravity, and so the consequences are that we are probably more likely to trip because we are not where we would normally be in sense of pressure and centre of gravity. So this goes a little bit to explaining why people do tend to trip over more when they are walking their dog. So from our perspective, what we need to do is talk to people when we're prescribing dogs, and talk to normal dog walkers walking kilometres and kilometres every day about just being conscious of what their posture is doing to try and minimise their risk of falling.
They say that age is just a number, especially when it comes to choosing to stay fit and active as you get older, Jo. And now I can picture you running well into your twilight years, Jo.
I hope I will be. I believe you use it or lose it, right? So I insist that I keep running until my knees give out.
My father-in-law, David Shaw, Beck's dad, is just a legend. He's 84. He runs his 6Ks every day, does his 100 push-ups, his 100 swims in the bay all year round. You've never seen anyone stronger, healthier and fitter. a good effort at that age.
Yes.
That is amazing, isn't it, at that age? Exactly. I'm hopeful that I'll be riding horses into my sunset years. When you look at people like Andrew Hoy still winning Olympic medals in his 60s, it can be done. And one super fit Victorian retiree is proving that age really is just a number. Lavinia Petrie is 78 years young and is still setting world records for running. She recently broke the Australian record in the 3-kilometre race in her category at the Victorian Masters Athletics competition. She ran the 3Ks in 14 minutes and 13 seconds, if you don't mind, an Australian record and almost a world record.
That is... Under 5
do
minute
you
K,
run?
not that fast. There's no way. That is amazing. 78 and still running that time for 3Ks. What a champion.
Watch out for her. She's been running since the age of 18. Well, not continuously. Her latest record-breaking run is one of many, and that doesn't look like diminishing anytime soon. She now has her sights on breaking the world record in the 3-kilometre and the 10-kilometre events.
Now that I've broken the 3K record, I want to break it again because I know that I can run a lot faster than what I did in that particular day. And I just like the fact that I'm best in my age group. Yeah, I suppose I'm lucky that my body's been able to do the things that it's done for me. Never ever set out to say, well, I'm going to be the best in the world until it actually happened. And I thought, oh, I am the best in the world.
I was about to say, I hope I'm like Lavinia when I'm 78, but I'd be happy to be able to do that now, to be honest.
Running 10 kilometres and 3 kilometres, just... What a champion, I can't believe it. At any age, but at 78, she's inspiring.
Yeah, a beautiful story. And she's also a member of her local retirement village walking group, which keeps her socially connected. That's when she steps back for the walking group. But running is her real love. Her advice to anyone, whatever their age, is to listen to your body. And if you feel pain, stop until you've fixed the problem.
Great advice and a great note to finish our show for today. Thank you to Jackie. Great to see you as always. And Joe, listeners can tune in to you and Gerald Quigley, as always, this Sunday on the House of Wellness radio show.
Yes, they can. Plus, check out the House of Wellness lift out with Delta Goodrum on the cover this weekend.
Thanks, as always, to our great friends at Chemist Warehouse. We'll see you soon.